Please welcome the President and CEO of the Council on Foundations, Vikki Spruill.
Wow, that's all I can say. Thank you, Cynthia Germanata, your daughter, Lady Gaga, and the Born This Way Foundation for working with us to create that awesome video. I can't think of a better way to start us off than with a reminder of why we do this work. All of us here are in some way working to build a future that allows young people to achieve their dreams. So with that, I welcome you to Washington, D.C. It is such a pleasure to have so many passionate leaders in philanthropy gathered in our nation's capital during a time of such consequence for our country. The future president and much of our Congress is up for grabs. The balance of the Supreme Court remains uncertain. These are the leaders that will shape issues of war and peace. They'll determine the laws that govern our country. They'll make profound decisions about our economic future. They'll represent our country and its ideals in the community of nations. The stakes don't really get much higher, and D.C. is where it all comes together. This is the place where men and women with all their fragile humanity make the decisions that shape history. It's a fitting place for us to talk about the future of philanthropy and the future of community. Before we tackle the big ideas shaping the next few days, I want to thank the architects of this conference. We've gathered more than 1,300 philanthropic leaders and over 350 speakers for more than 100 carefully curated events. We've created targeted programming for community foundations, family foundations, corporate foundations, globally oriented foundations, as well as 5 major pre-conference programs, receptions, and world-class plenaries. I want to express my deep gratitude to those who've made this conference experience possible. We've had 5 working groups who've been developing conference programming for 6 months. Our board and our conference partners have raised the resources we need to ensure the very best experience for you. In particular, I want to express our deep appreciation to the Walton Family Foundation, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, Medtronic Foundation, Lilly Endowment, Inc., and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Our staff have been working for well over a year to make sure that all the details are just right for you. So I'd like to ask that our working groups, our conference partners, the council board, and the council team please stand to be recognized for their dedication and hard work. Stand up. So the next 3 days together offer an opportunity to learn and to be challenged in our thinking, to connect with one another and to make progress on some of today's most pressing issues. Our hope is to elevate the discourse in our profession and to help all of us think differently about our work. We're drawing on ideas from history, finance, economic development, civil rights, education, and moral philosophy to help us better understand the future of community and philanthropy's role in changing and shaping our world. So get ready to dig in because we've got some serious work to do. So on a chilly day like today, wasn't quite expecting that, the last thing you want to do is to think about the deep, dark heart of winter. But just bear with me for a minute. I want you to think about New Year's Eve. Imagine a pair of families who meet up every year to celebrate. Picture old friends at the holidays. You're comparing snapshots of the grandkids. You're trading stories about who's got a new job, a new house, a new baby. Over the course of that evening, the conversation ranges, but it never lags. Imagine the discussions you have when you talk with a truly kindred spirit. Now, what if I told you that these old friends were one of the most famous odd couples of the century? Different politics, different sensibilities, different genders, different faiths. What if I told you they came down on opposite sides of almost every contentious debate of the last generation? And what if I told you that despite those differences, they never missed a chance to celebrate a new year together or to sit side by side at the opera that they both loved? The friendship between Justices Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg was, I think, one of the most poignant pieces of news to come out of his recent passing. In the days after his death, Justice Ginsburg wrote a moving tribute to the man she called her best buddy. He was a larger-than-life man who couldn't have thought more differently from her when it comes to interpreting the Constitution that they both sought to uphold. What I see here is more than a story of unexpected friendship. I see an inspiration for the future of community. Given the tone of our national politics, it's hard not to be preoccupied with the future. I think often about the kind of world that my 2 daughters will inherit. I worry that the ties which have kept our national community together feel strained. There's an old Japanese proverb that says, "Fire always makes room for itself." It captures the idea that fire finds ways to burn. It hungers for fuel. Today, it seems as though the fire of discord makes room for itself. It, too, hungers for fuel. Every group, every niche, every political perspective finds an audience, finds converts, and finds a home. There's a new buyer every second in today's marketplace of ideas. I have spoken with countless grant makers uncertain about this new normal and what it means for philanthropy. And at the same time, philanthropy is also a community. We're gathered here because we see ourselves as common practitioners of the grant-making profession. With so many ways to distinguish ourselves, what does the future of community mean for those we support? What does it mean for our own philanthropic community? These questions will shape the way the future of community beckons us forward. And despite the intellect in this room, I'm not sure that any single person here has the answer. But I do know that as leaders within civil society, philanthropy is uniquely suited to focus on the bonds and not the divisions. Without the pressures of an election or a business cycle, we have the opportunity to offer solutions that others cannot. And no matter your organization's size or type or mission or interest, we all share a common denominator, the desire to advance the common good. This desire is philanthropy's promise, and no one can do it as well as you can. Philanthropy makes real change possible in a changing world, and at the same time, it provides for the long-term vitality of communities. Philanthropy is driven to create meaningful impact using a wide variety of tools. We're able to resist partisan pressures and see past private interests. This independence provides indispensable social benefit and makes philanthropy a bedrock of civil society, a critical force for positive change in communities all across the globe. Philanthropy's place is between and among these and those who want to build a world that is sustainable, safe, and more just. So last year, I spoke about the importance of us leading together in order to fulfill this promise. This is the idea that philanthropy should develop collaborative leadership that focuses on impact over the individual concerns of any one person or one institution. This year, we're building on that concept and are focusing on the future of a community because we need to lead with a common vision in mind. And no place is that more important than in communities. So I'd like to share 3 ideas for you to consider as you go through these next few days. First, the nature of community is changing in our globalized, technology-rich world. Second, this new understanding needs to be used to solve our common challenges. And finally, as standard bearers for a new civility, we need the productive, mutual understanding it will take to get the job done, no matter the differences among us and in society more broadly. I know, this is a very tall order, but none of us can afford to sit this one out. So let's start with the changing nature of community because it's a brave new world out there. In the not-so-distant past, we defined ourselves largely by shared geography, but we also divided ourselves by race, by class, by ethnicity, and by faith. We didn't see others in part because we didn't engage others as much as we do today. Fast forward to the internet age and the real-time news cycle. With the click of a mouse, we can find like-minded people all over the globe. Armed with Snapchat, with Vine, and other grassroots technologies, young people and retirees alike have the chance to become cutting-edge entrepreneurs. It would seem that the more information we have, the more we know about others. And there is evidence that people are more tolerant and accepting than previous generations. But again, these are peculiar and sometimes contradictory times. The more we celebrate our unique affinities, identities, and traditions, the less we relate to those who don't share them. Newfound tolerances have expanded hearts and minds, but it's now easier to retreat behind the walls of our own communities, to stay with the familiar, to stay with the comfortable. We all love the sound of an echo chamber with voices like our own, so it can be easier to defriend an acquaintance on Facebook rather than to wrestle with his or her provocative political views. You can set up your phone to ensure that your news feed only gives you information from outlets you want to hear. You don't have to look beyond your feed to see that some of our oldest predispositions are still going strong. Similarly, in philanthropy, we're often drawn to working with like-minded partners or colleagues from the same foundation type or size. We understand that there's power in differences, yet in focusing on the differences and not on the opportunities, we miss out on expanding our view. It's not just possible for people to learn from each other and to recognize difference, it is essential. Philanthropy is uniquely situated to create social innovation, solve today's toughest challenges, and elevate our very highest ideals. Philanthropy is rooted in community, but capable of national and global reach. Philanthropy works across sectors in partnership with government, business, nonprofits to deliver on its promise. And so who better to balance on the head of this pin, recognizing the new forms community takes and yet bridging the differences among them? Who better than us? But to make good on this promise, philanthropy must make its role clear and relatable to the public at large. And it must do this even as it undergoes its own series of changes and fends off its own threats. Philanthropy mirrors the world within which we operate. So when we seek to understand the future of community, we have the responsibility to look at both the communities we serve and the professional community in which we all work. Which turns me to my second idea for your consideration, and that is to find fellowship with one another in determining your path forward as leaders. Find fellowship in promoting the good you do and recognize the unique role you play in harmony with your grantees. Find fellowship in ensuring philanthropy's sustainability even as it undergoes change. Find fellowship in cultivating and mentoring new, more diverse leaders for our field. And perhaps most importantly, we need to find fellowship in fighting our society's toughest systemic problems, from inequality to climate change. That's why we're united around a shared commitment to collaboration, to leading together. As we planned this conference, we surveyed hundreds of ideas and looked at a wide variety of important and burning issues. We selected 3 of the most pressing issues of our time: climate change, education, and justice reform. These are issues where foundations of all types and sizes are coming together to create the kind of transformational impact that resonates with any issue you may be tackling. Our hope is that even if you don't fund in those specific areas, you'll connect with your colleagues to explore new ideas that might be applicable to your priorities. You'll have the chance to dig into the urgent local, national, and global concerns of climate change. We'll also talk about education and skill acquisition. Both are essential in today's economy because everyone in this workforce, myself included, must continually learn new lessons and develop new skills. And we'll address philanthropy's leadership in addressing the modern crisis of our justice system. None of these conversations around these issues will be easy. People on all sides of the debates feel passionate and sometimes aggressively opposed. There are no shortcuts here, but these are the responsibilities we've taken on. If philanthropy can't address these issues, who will? Which brings me to my final idea. Each of you is engaged somehow in the business of changing the world. You inspire me, which means each of you has learned that change-making is messy stuff. My charge to all of us as we go forward in this work of community building is to be champions for a new and much-needed civility. Civility is an attitude which leads to discovery, and with it, our bonds will be stronger. Let's challenge ourselves and each other to find common ground as we work to promote the common good. The future of community requires philanthropy to bring people to champion mutual engagement and to bring leaders together around important challenges. The future of community transcends geography. It transcends ideology. It contains many, many interests, and that's okay, because the bonds worth having are the ones that take effort. All communities are rooted in history, and philanthropy is no exception. As part of the Council on Foundations community, I am privileged by a rich legacy of leadership by people from across the field. Every day, I'm grateful to be able to stand on the shoulder of giants, many of whom are in this room with us today. One of those giants, Ambassador Jim Josephs, a predecessor of mine at the Council, recently wrote a book reflecting on his personal journey to leadership. In it, he shares some wisdom for us as we think about the future of community, and I want to quote him here. The bonds of social cohesion and community are incredibly fragile. Moral theologians, political philosophers, opinion leaders, and pundits of all sorts are once again in search for common ground. Yet it may be that they're searching in the wrong place, assuming that American society was somehow fixed and final, rather than a community that is always in the making. What has sustained me in my efforts to help build a new and altogether just America has been the notion that our uniqueness as a people lies not in the occasional assumption that we have finally formed the ideal community, but in the fact that we are always seeking to form a more perfect union. Thank you, Ambassador Joseph. The future of community is one inspired by a desire to constantly make a better, stronger community. Together, this philanthropic community may build a future that reflects the light of Ambassador Joseph's sentiment. The future we want is one where we can fight it out in a courtroom and still celebrate New Year's Eve as friends. It will not happen without your dedicated efforts. It definitely won't happen without your collaboration. But by leading together with civility as our compass, we can mold the future into a better, safer, and more just version of the present. Friends, colleagues, the opportunity is here for the seizing. There is no time to wait. Let's get to work. Thank you so much. Darling.